It's Sunday at 4 o'clock, so that's when I take this opportunity to talk about the Sanctuary of Play as a church. We'll discuss topics such as interpretation of scriptures, questions from the congregation, how to describe play, how we feel about play. But first, let's see. You can find Sanctuary of Play information at our website. But very briefly, Sanctuary of Play is a virtual church with a joyful mission that play is a sacred gift and an innate part of our natures which should be celebrated. We feel play is a basic need like sleep, food and water, shelter, and community. Like those practices, play is good for us, has a purpose, and can be expressed in many ways. We're going to talk about play and encourage play in our lives. This is the 2-month anniversary of me starting to put these chats out on Twitch. And so far, it's been a good experiment. I'm going to continue experimenting in today's format. I have done outline mode and I have done reading from a script. This is going to be my exploration into whether or not I can talk about things just on a topic without even an outline. So be prepared to ramble. This is your warning. It might not have structure and it might not come to a conclusion. It's basically for the purposes of this specific one to see how I feel about rambling. I've chosen basically a listicle that I will be reacting to. If that doesn't appeal to you, that's okay. But if you're curious, stay on. All right, I want to do a little bit of story time before I get to the list. I have a bunch of thoughts in my head about future chats, and one of those future chats is going to be about care. What kind of care a parasocial virtual church can give. You can even call it pastoral care, even though that's an extremely niche topic. And there's a lot to say there, and I'm not going to get into it right now because I think that's going to be scripted. I don't want to miss anything about that topic. I think it's important. But as I was exploring the space mentally, I realized that one of the things that non-parasocial virtual churches, actual churches with sanctuaries, provide is a third place. Like, we have almost no third places that are unbiased or unhindered or don't come with acknowledgement of why the space exists. I think the closest we get to that are our public parks. Some of the museums that have free days, and then also the sanctuaries of the church are always open. And I didn't understand that as a child. I went to the church when I was taken to the church for lessons or services, and it wasn't until I was visiting my friends' churches that I understood that there was a space inside, out of the elements, with seats, or not if you're Orthodox Christian. I don't think they have seats. But there was a space to go that was dedicated to being open to the public and being contemplative. And I think that that is really valuable. And it made me think about what it's like to hold space and have a openness for everyone to walk in. The gates were not locked. There were times when I'm sure there was security in some way, but there's been times I've walked into sanctuaries where nobody came out to greet me, nobody made sure I was okay, which is kind of a relief to just be outside of my house in a space where I can exist and think. And I thought about what it would be like to be that space and how I would view the people who walked in. And that combined with the recent errand that I ran down to San Jose, where the group of us went and took a little spin around the Rosicrucian Museum's grounds, made me think about being a guest, being good behavior. That museum is also a church, so it crosses over, really applicable. And they have an entire city block. And for the most part, their gardens are open. We just walked around. We walked around the whole thing. There was a labyrinth that we walked. There were games that we could have played, like Lawn Senate. There were no gates. There were barely any walls. And it's true that there were reserved spaces in the compound that were for private use of the organization. And that didn't take away anything from being able to sit under a tree and enjoy the garden. And we were guests. So I was trying to think about, the flip of that. And the combination of thinking about how to respect guests and honor guests and see guests as the same as me, and that visit reminded me in that I got taken to the Rosicrucian Museum quite a bit as a child. It was something that was nearby, so we went there a lot on field trips. And I enjoyed it, so I think we took me there sometimes just for me, which I appreciated. And the museum is an Egyptology museum, for the most part. And they have a reconstruction, kind of a hybrid. You know how you go to housing places that are selling housing, they have a model house. They had a model Egyptian tomb. If there was a mummy, what would the mummy be put into as far as in situation? And for the most part, it was a guided tour with a docent. I don't know if they now have like fobs that you can go in without the docent, but at the time it was a timed tour with a docent who walked you around and kept you together. I think to some extent because the tomb was beautifully put together, and I would hate for the tomb to have gone to any damage from someone's clumsiness or thoughtfulness. So I'd been exposed to a lot of different docents holding the space to us as guests, and I was used to the information that was given on the tour. And it varied. There was always a baseline of information, but depending on who your docent was, it got much more interesting. And there was one time where there was a teeny tiny little old man, and I was a child, so he must have been actually fairly small. But he was incredibly dapper, very well put together. Just when you look at medieval stuff and there are these doors that start at our shoulders, he would have fit in those doors. But impeccably dressed and very, very old-fashioned dressed. And I loved his tour the most. And part of what he had done, besides taking us through the tomb as if it was his own house, it was really lovely and warm. And part of what he did is when we got to the painted section, which was above where the sarcophagus would have gone, and he was explaining the intent behind all of the paintings on the walls, where there was like hunting and fishing scenes so that the person who was there could have sports in the afterlife. And I love that gaming was still part of the afterlife for them. Very awesome. But that's not what I'm going to talk about in this section. He, when getting to the end, this is the process that we believe the dead person goes through, going from being alive to being in the afterlife, where they would be able to enjoy all of these things that we've put on the walls for them. There was a reckoning of life. And in that reckoning of life, there's kind of this deity of judgment called Ma'at. And Ma'at's symbol is an ostrich feather. So Anubis is presenting the person to go through this trial of the heart. And there's the heart gets weighed against the feather. And I'd always kind of understood that, but what I did not know until he presented it to me is that this trial of the feather is actually codified, and that there are generally regarded, none of us were actually alive back then, but most of the evidence is that there was a series of questions that you needed to answer in the negative to show that you had not been a bad person. And then if you could answer those questions, then your heart would be measured against a feather, and you could go and like enjoy, hunting on the Nile for the rest of your life, hopefully without hippos. So I thought, with the mindset of how we are very, very similar to each other, and how across the centuries being a good person can very much be harmonious, that I'd review the 42 questions and had kind of react to each question as it goes. I've deliberately not researched a whole lot. I didn't get into the questions, I kind of copy pasted them because I want to come at this from as innocent a mindset as I can. I mean, I already know one or two of the questions because the one that he hit me with in that cool, dark, brightly painted place to about whether or not I could actually go forward or whether or not I'd be devoured was, have you ever let a child go hungry? And even as a child, I don't know if I could answer that. Especially since I was raised as a middle class American of white. No matter what my great grandparents thought about it, I am white at this point. So I was raised incredibly individualistic. So I didn't even have an awareness about whether or not I'd ever let any of my classmates go hungry. Right? So I'm sure I'm going to have even more questions once I'm through with this list of 42 challenges of Ma'at. But that's just my nature. Let's get into it. All right, so I'm going to pull up I made a spreadsheet because I'm me. Is it still reacting to my voice? Awesome. I'm being told I still react to my voice. So when I went to go look for just a really simple 42 question Ma'at, because I'm not an Egyptologist, I'm not a scholar of a bunch of different things, so I was okay having a very surface level view. I found two lists, and the lists looked comparable, but they didn't match one for one. Like the question on 1 was not the same question on 1. The question on 7 was not the same question on 7. And I don't know where the ordering comes from on these two lists. One of the lists was from a lyceum of, I think, Isis. I don't know. Anyhow, there is a Egyptology recreation spirituality group founded by an Irish woman who was born in the 1930s that I actually really respect. They're very earnest, they're very thoughtful. Part of the reason I know about them is because somebody who has a lyceum in Mount Shasta is the Reiki master who gave me my level 3 attunement. I don't get to see them very often, but I love them and adore them, and I honor them and I respect them. So I expected that there was a lot of thought that went into their listing of the 42 questions of Ma'at. But it didn't match in it didn't match anything else that I found. And everything as far as like this for that, this for that, this for that. And I'm sure if I wanted to take the time to go in and go, okay, this one's that one, that one's the other one, this 13 is that 42, I could find it. But I'm going to go by the list of the Papyrus of Ani, which I found on Wikipedia because I'm not doing a deep dive. And one of the things that I found interesting about the Papyrus of Ani is each of the challenges comes with a kind of a patron deity. And I find this fascinating because that was not something that he did when I was down there in the tomb. He didn't say, you know, hey, guy who's in charge of people not starving, I haven't let anyone go hungry. But evidently, there's like this deity in charge of the thing for each of these challenges. And I haven't done any sort of dive about what these people are. I'm going to be saying the names as much as I can. And also, it's my impression, which might not be right, that the names of the deities can change or be combined. So it might be considered much like my impression of some of the Hindi deities. So this is maybe a human practice that, much the same way that Mrs. last name can also be the head of accounts, can also be somebody's mom, can also be somebody's sister. What we call the deities is how we are approaching their area of influence. And so it is my understanding that it is possible in some of these pantheons that you are looking at the same power in context. Also, I've been given to understand that sometimes if you are trying to appeal to something, you might combo the names, and I don't know how that's approached because it's not my practice, but it could be, Mrs. Who, in your capacity as a mom, blah, 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 blah. In which case, you're like, but I thought mom was this other person. Like, no, 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 no. So I don't know and that's a very human thing. Like if we were looking for lost things, you might put out milk for Ganesh as the opener of the doors, or you might go to a saint. I forget which saint it is that you like bury money and he tells you where things are. Evidently, it's a human thing. So I'm charmed that when I went and looked at the 42 Have You Been a Bad Person of Ma'at, there was somebody in charge of it. But I also noticed in a very, very fast thing that when I was looking, like 42 was a lot. There's some things in here that ended up looking from a very, very fast skim with a redundant. So I will react as I go. Enough to explaining. The first one is, and I love that this is the first one, Hail Usek Nemt, who comes forth from Anu. I have no idea what that means. I have not committed sin. That is a really broad category. I mean, like that like the next 42 could be. I mean, this is a great catch-all. But there was a separate list in the Wikipedia that lists things as the sin, which was evidently somebody named Wilkinson's opinion about what they're talking about. And so it did validate me going, but sin is such a catch-all that he lists sin as a way to look at each of these questions. But that could be an artifact of the fact that we're talking in English. Anyhow, Wilkinson said that this sin is falsehood. So it might be, I have not lied. And I still think that that's a great one for the beginning of these 42 things, because if you're a liar, we don't even have to go any farther. I won't be able to trust any of your answers. Second one, Hail Hepket, who comes forth from Ker Aha. I have not committed robbery with violence. Specifically, robbery with violence. I think that's an interesting distinction. But from the viewpoint of, is this somebody that I would welcome in my sanctuary? Yeah, absolutely. That's something I want you to have not done. I do think, though, it's interesting that robbery versus robbery with violence are separate things, and there's stuff later in the list that I know is about stealing. So I think this is more along the lines of I'm not only the difference between like assault and battery. I've not only done the thing, but I've done it in a way that causes even more harm. I've amplified the harm. So, third one is Hail Fenty, who comes forth from Kemenu. I have not stolen. That's blatant. I'm leaving it there. Hail Kabit, who comes forth from Quernet. I have not slain men and women. And I think it's nice that both of the dyad of gender expression are included, because a lot of times one class or the other is excluded as being as human and deserving of care. But this one's like, yeah, I have not slain men and women. Go ahead. Really awesome. All right. Hail Nehaher, who comes forth from Rasta. I have not stolen grain. And this is about stealing, and I think it is different than ones that come later. And I think it's about the quality of grain as being a staple food. I have not removed the staff of life from somebody. I have not like cut them down at the root that way. So, hail Reruti, who comes forth from heaven. I have not purloined offerings. So it's not just, stealing, but stealing offerings. So that's interesting. And it's, I don't know why. It might be community care, because temples provide community service and they keep themselves afloat because they those offerings get used. So it might not just be blasphemy. It might be about I have not taken back community support from the temples. But that just might be my viewpoint as somebody who's trying to think of like what would it take to maintain a sanctuary. Which comes to the next one of Hail Arfi Ket, who comes forth from Swat. I have not stolen the property of God. Interesting distinction between offerings and the property of God. In also, I have not stolen. I haven't stolen grain. I haven't stolen offerings. I haven't stolen the property. They're really obsessed with the stealing thing, which I think is interesting in the mindset of whatever is important, you have a lot of words for. Kind of like the joke about the Irish probably have a million words for rain. It's spitting down, it's sprinkling, it's a lovely mist. Oh, it's really, hammer and tongs, cats and dogs. And, we're in like line 6 or 7, and it might just that it's doing it in sections, but that's a lot. But we're finally getting away from that. Hail Neba, who comes and ghosts. So Neba, who's, here and there. I have not uttered lies. I don't know why somebody who comes and goes would be in charge of lies, but I guess if they get around, they get around. Let's see. Hail Set Kesu, who comes forth from Hensu. I have not carried away food. Which I guess is completely different than stealing grain or taking offerings. My guess, first impression, not knowing anything, is that if there's a community resource, like we're baking bread in the common oven, because it saves on wood, which you don't have a lot in a non-forested area, and managing a big oven takes uptime, downtime, and skill. So you've got somebody who's good at that. So everyone brings their bread to be baked. And it's rude to take more than your share from the food. So again, one of the ones that I'm interpreting as I'm bad at community. Hail Itu Nesert, who comes forth from Hetkapa. I have not uttered curses. I think this is about being not necessarily being grumbly and wishing ill on people. Again, about being community oriented, Don't run your mouth. Don't, nah. So, Hail QWERTY comes forth to Amentet. I have not committed adultery. Hey, we got one that matches the Bible, the Ten Commandments again. Awesome. I think that one's fairly, whatever, evident. Let's see. Hail Kemeti, who comes forth from Kenmet. Kenmeti from Kenmet. That makes sense. I have not blasphemed. That requires that we understand what blaspheming is, but I have not broken taboos. Sounds like a great thing to have. Hail Basti, who comes forth from Bast. I have not eaten the heart. I don't know what that means. That is so evocative. I think if there's one of them that I'm going to look up after this, I'm going to look that up. Especially since it's Bast, who is usually seen as fairly warrior-like and being laid out in the sun, being exposed and having everything burned away sort of feeling. So Basti being in charge of just punishing with exposure and heat. Somebody who ate the heart sounds like something I want to look up, but also I'm good on having community. Hail Ta Riktiu, who comes forth from the night. I have not attacked any man. I don't know, because this is a translation, if this is something where the person translating intended it to be the gender or intended to be the people, like the man and the woman. But I'm good with battery being something that you're not supposed to do. Hail Enim Snef, who comes forth from the execution chamber. I am not a man of deceit. That's a different line than I will not tell lies. I guess this is for the people who like to mislead with the truth. I'm liking that it's catching a lot of things that people who might be on the Dark Triads or Cluster B personality without support that is expressing their neurotype in a destructive way. I'm glad that they're catching that kind of don't do that. Hail Enim Besek, who comes forth from Mabit. I have not stolen cultivated land. That's interesting. He's not talking about the crops. I've not stolen. I don't know if they're talking about crops, but I also don't know if they're talking about the area of the Nile that overflows, or if they're talking about the work that goes into making a field, because making a field takes work. So I'm glad that there's something about, oh, that field? It was just, that's mine now. Especially since it was difficult to get around. So you might not know that somebody had gone and planted a field until you got there. And, what are you supposed to do about it then? It becomes a problem. I guess that really shows how agrarian this is. And as somebody who lives in a metropolis, it's nice to be reminded of not the way that you got protected about not having to keep your eye on all of your resources. I think that that's something that would lead to a lot of harmony. I really like that. Hail Nebma'at, who comes forth from Ati. I have not been an eavesdropper. Oh, that's awesome. Oh, I love that. Yes. Don't listen in on people when you're not part of that conversation. That is awesome. Yes. All right. I'm really liking this code so far. Hail 10 MEU, who comes forth from Bast. I have not slandered anyone. Okay. Nice to know that Bast, who's like, don't eat the heart, is also like, don't run your mouth. Which really makes me, again, I'm going to look up what don't eat the heart means because I'm so curious. All right. The next one is Hail Sertui, who comes forth from Anu. I have not been angry without just cause. I love that. Yes, anger is appropriate. Anger is something that can and should happen in a community because if you roll over for everything, then one, you can feel how you feel. I think it is damaging to people's hearts to ask them to not feel. And so I'm really delighted and kind of touched that being able to have your feelings made it onto the list of 42. That's fantastic. Okay. Hail Tutu, who comest forth from Ati. I have not debauched the wife of any man. That's interesting because we had one about adultery up above, and debauched is a very interesting word, even though I know it's a translation. But it's an intentional translation to use a fairly arcane word in the English language, debauched. So I guess this is don't be trifling with somebody else's. Like, I wonder if this is like don't think bad thoughts or don't lead her on, or I love that it puts the onus of responsibility of action on the person tempting the person out of commitment. I I do feel that somebody who's in a commitment needs to hold to their promises, but also people should respect that situation. All right. And then something I'm wondering about on this papyrus is whether or not there were any duplicates. Like, did it like just take 4 different lists from other places and shove them together? I don't know. I don't have scholarship, but also I'm not culturally grounded in the mindset of what would have been happening at the time. So I don't know if Hail Amti, who comes forth from the kept chamber, I don't know what the kept chamber is. I have not debauched the wives of other men. So I guess there's some sort of procedural difference between going after one woman or just generally being a cad. And I could see that. Next one is Hail Ma Antuf, who comes forth from Permenu. I have not polluted myself. I don't know what that means. But I do feel that whatever it is, whether it's bad behavior or bad practices or taking in bad substances, it's a good reminder to honor yourself as well as all these other people. All right. Hail, Herr Uru comes forth from Nehatu. I have terrorized none. Good. I think that there's too little consequences for actively trying to cause somebody emotional harm right now. And even though overall people own their feelings, we still don't let people call fire in a theater. And I don't think that as a community we've got something that is the equivalent of you have freedom of speech but don't call fire in a theater about causing terror. I'm going to burn down your house. Terrorizing. Anyhow, let's see. Hail Kem Ayu, who comes forth from Kauai. I'm sure they're not coming from the island in Hawaii. I have not transgressed the law. You know, I think it needs to be said. There is a difference between sin, breaking various things like don't steal, and transgressing the law. So, it's nice that they're covering so many bases. Hail Shet Keru, who comes forth from Urut, I have not been angry. This is an interesting dichotomy, because there was one angry without cause. So I guess this is for people who um, have a bad habit of being angry. Anger can be addicting. It feels like progress. It feels like action. It's a release. And much the same of any other things, such as, I think anger can be addicting just because it's so simple. So it's nice that they've called that out. Hail Nekhenu, who comes forth from Hekat, I have not shut my ears to the words of the truth. I hadn't skimmed down this far in the list. I had not known that this way to be a good person from Egypt from 5,000 years ago would be so topical, but humans are humans. I have not shut my ears to the words of the truth. I think we need that today. This next one is Hail Hrafhaf, who comes forth from thy cavern. I have made none to weep. I think I did look this one up, or one. There's probably one very much farther down, where I'm like to weep. Uh, mm. And from what little I've been able to glean in like the 5 minutes I spent on it, that it's I haven't abused somebody. I haven't, because you can um, not be violent and be absolutely truthful and still be abusive. You can be not harmful physically and still be abusive. And what I like about this one, if it's the one that I'm thinking of, that it does not take into account your intentions at all. It's about the impact. It's about the victim. Like, did you behave in a way that the impact was you wrecked somebody? And I think that's a good thing to, make people aware of as being not a good thing. All right. Hail Anhetep, who comes forth from Sau. I'm not good at these. I am not a man of violence. My feeling is that this is like I've not been angry. This is, you don't default to violence. It's not in your toolbox. You're a peaceful person who tries to get along with everyone. Hail Sarah Keru, who comes forth from Unaset. I have not been a stirrer up of strife. If only we could not have Karens. Oh my goodness. I Yeah, that's a no-brainer. That's amazing that you have to actually think of that to have your eternal reward. I'm loving all the gates. I wish I knew more about each of these uh, people who basically have to sign off on the heart. Like, person who's in charge of this area. He good? Yeah, he good. Okay. Hail Nebheru, who comes forth from Nechfet. I have not acted in undue haste. I, this would catch me. I, I used to take those quizzes that asked if you would think about things before you did them, and I'm like, yeah, I stopped long enough to have a thought, and I would mark it that I'm thoughtful. And it wasn't until I was around people who don't get stuff done because they're still pondering the implications that I realized that um, they're talking about stopping long enough to actually reflect on it actively in a deep way. The only thing that might save me is undue haste. I don't think I've ever done something in a panicked way. Hail Sekiheriu, who comes forth from Uten. I have not pried into others' matters. Can we take this one into the modern age? I would love this. Because there's a difference between being community oriented and being nosy enough of people's business. Yes. Hail Neb Abui, who comes forth from Asauti. I have not multiplied my words in speaking. I might be doing that one right now on this podcast. But I don't think I'm blathering that much. I think I'm staying on topic. It's an interesting question, and I don't know if I necessarily understand what they mean by multiplied my words in speaking. This might just be don't be a gossip. We'll find out. Hail Tesh Eser Tep, who comes forth from the shrine. I have not carried away the Kenfu cakes from the spirits of the dead. All right, this is a, don't steal. It's a really specific don't steal. It's not offerings, it's not the god, it is don't carry away the cakes from the spirits of the dead. It'd be like, I'm near San Francisco, and the mission has a big public ofrenda for Halloween All Saints, and there are specific things that you put out, and also but there's quite a few East Asian people in this area as well, where there will be ancestor ceremonies where they will put out paper money, but also, like, if your aunt just died the year before and her favorite was to have rice rolls rolled around a shrimp, you would put that out that year as kind of a I still remember you, you're welcome in my home. And if the toddler eats that, awesome, it's a toddler. Shrimp rolls are delicious. But yeah, you don't remove honoring the dead. And I'm sure there's a whole lot more to that, but I hate that they have to say it. On a lot of these, I really hate that they have to say it, even though it's a really good thing to say. Hail Nefertem, who comes forth from Hetkapah Ptah. I have wronged none. I have done no evil. That seems really blanket, considering that we have extremely granular questions about stealing. So I'd be interested in what that meant moving forth. Let's see. Hail Temsepu, who comes forth from Tetu. I have not worked witchcraft against the king. I guess it's okay to work witchcraft against other people. Like, there's several layers here. Like, witchcraft is a thing. Evidently, it's a thing you can do. I'm like, awesome, because quite a lot of that comes down to like herbal remedies, like spearing honey on something to get it to like not infect. Technically, can be seen as witchcraft. Um, and I'm good not going septic and dying, but and it's not against somebody maliciously. It's against the king. So I guess you're not allowed to overthrow community. All right. Ooh, I can see the bottom. I can see the bottom. We got a few left. All right. Hail Ari M. Up F, who comes forth from Tebu. I have never stopped the flow of water of a neighbor. Ooh. I'm Californian. The water wars in the 1950s were something. There's a photo diary called The Last Harvest of when they took an entire valley, closed up the ends, and flooded it to make one of our reservoirs. They took arable land and destroyed the environment. But even from a modern day thing, if you go onto, for example, YouTube, where this is going to eventually end up, um, there's there are people who do it. Like, there's agrarian places where there's a central ditch that carries water along the edges of everyone's farm, and you have the right to stop that water flow and divert it into your fields at certain times with certain gates. And there's like a water master who's in charge of that. And there are epics people locking other people's gates, etc., etc., etc. Yeah, this is absolutely eternal. This is very to the point where there there's parts of places that have heavy agriculture, but also a drought, and also waterways that have to be at a certain level for natural processes like spawning of salmon to happen, that have put in laws against collecting rainwater. And on individuals would be like, it's falling on my roof, it's my water. But they don't think about the overall impact of once it hits the ground, then what? So I have never stopped the flow of neighbors' water is eternal, evergreen. All right, just a few left. Hail Ahi, who comes forth from Nu. I have never raised my voice. Okay, I'm not making it. I have been in disagreements where I did shout. I would like to believe that it was usually to be heard when somebody else raised their voice first. It's not a situation I find myself in often, and when I find myself in it, I find myself in it with specific people. But there's no caveat here. So I'm out. Okay. I all of my loved ones who go on to the forever lands and get to, enjoy your painted landscapes, remember me fondly, please. Hail, I'm still going to live the best life I can. Okay. Hail, Uat Rekit, who comes forth from Sau. I have not cursed God. Oh, okay. Okay. Um, I don't know if this is a, grumble or what. I'm going to leave this one alone. Hail Nehebka, who comes forth from thy cavern. I have not acted with arrogance. This would get so many people. I guess it comes down to what's arrogance. And is there a difference between feeling arrogant or holding yourself in high esteem and acting arrogant? I don't know. Okay, 3 left. We're almost there. Hail Nefert. Hail Neheb Nefert, who comes forth from thy cavern. I have not stolen the bread of the gods. So that's different than offerings. That's different from stealing God's property. That's different than stealing everyday bread. That's different from stealing grave bread. I guess they were really against people getting handsy. There wasn't a lot of surveillance back then. So I guess they really have to call out even if nobody's watching, dude. Okay. Which comes, Hail Het Apu, who comes forth from Tashe. I have not slain the cattle belonging to the god. Okay, it's not an offering yet. It hasn't been offered up. I'm just gonna take this calf right now and go make barbecue. It wasn't an offering. It's just in your field. So it's they're not saying you can't take other people's cattle. They just said other people's bread. Did they have free range cattle? Did they not have herds? There's so much I don't know about ancient Egypt. I mean, for all we know, it was like, other parts of the world nearby-ish, where you do just have cows wandering the street. They belong to themselves. Or even, for example, up in Iceland, everyone knows whose pony is whose. They keep track of breeding, but for the most part, the ponies take care of themselves. They're kind of a symbiotic, like the humans rely on the ponies, and the ponies are taken care of by the humans, but the ponies own themselves to a large extent. So maybe it's like that, where you're like, you know that's somebody's cow. Yeah. And the last one, oh, this must be the one that he challenged me with. I didn't realize that it would be the last one. Yay, symmetry. Hail Anaf, who comes forth from Mati. I have not snatched away the bread of the child, nor treated with contempt the god of my city. That's an interesting combination. That to remove care from a child is the same as contempt to your God. Putting it together that taking care away from the child is the same as contempt to your God. What a place to end. Wow. All right. So that was my very innocent, non scholarly first reaction to reading through the 42 questions of being judged against the feather of Ma'at, where your heart is weighed, from the Papyrus of Ani, which I thought of as something to do because I had recently enjoyed walking on the gardens of the Rosicrucian, and I've been thinking about what it means to be a third space. So I will keep these in my heart when I open up myself to any congregant or visitor. I'd like to let people know, this is going to end up on YouTube and the transcript's going to end up on my Patreon, that I very often of a morning listen to a radio app on Twitch. And because the radio app is playing music as it was broadcast by country or by decade, so I'll be like, let's go listen to, New Zealand in the 1960s. It'll play me a song from that decade in that space. But it is all something that I can never, ever put up on YouTube because I'll get a copyright violation with a quickness, which means that you can be sure that if you ask me questions, I won't be publishing it. So I'd like to invite anybody who wants to approach me as somebody who's part of the Sanctuary of Play and ask me questions about the Sanctuary of Play, or even ask for help or guidance from me as an individual. I'm not any sort of accreditation, although I do have a pastor's license. I'm ordained. In talking about how to be a third space as a parasocial church, which I'm going to talk much more about later, I am open to you giving care anytime I've got radio playing on Twitch. If it's got that app up, I am happy to turn it down and talk to you, or even pause it and talk to you. I'm here for you. I'm happy to be here for you. And I will hopefully continue to be here for you. I think that's a great place to leave this, so I'm going to stop recording, and I will have another one of these, probably more focused and maybe not as long, next week, Sunday, 4 p.m. Pacific time. Bye.